I never thought I'd question my own sister's loyalty until I found her pregnancy test in my bathroom, hidden behind the soap dispenser. I swear my heart just about stopped when I saw it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd taken the day off from work to tackle some laundry and cleaning, domestic errands I kept putting off. My husband, Ethan, was supposedly busy with meetings across town, and my older sister, Rachel, was out, looking for job opportunities. Her words, not mine. She arrived 2 weeks ago, unannounced, saying she needed a place to crash for a while. Rachel was always the golden child in our family, the one who soared through every school assignment, scored scholarships, had all the boyfriends wrapped around her finger. Me, I was the baby, good for comedic relief and not much else, at least in my parents' eyes. But that's the background. Fast forward to me in the bathroom, arms full of towels, pushing aside a half-empty shampoo bottle so I could wipe down the sink. That's when I noticed a small pink stick. My first reaction was a confused, almost comical double take. Wait, is that a? I set the towels aside and inched closer, feeling my stomach flip. Sure enough, it was a pregnancy test. I picked it up gingerly, my heart thumping so loud I could hear my pulse in my ears. It was definitely used. There was a faint positive symbol still visible in the tiny window. My mind instantly went into overdrive. I've never wanted a child, at least not yet, and Ethan and I have been super careful. Could it be mine? No, that was impossible. We're not even trying. So that left exactly one other possibility, Rachel. The sister who'd shown up on our doorstep out of nowhere, suitcase in hand, insisting it was just a short visit. Are you for real? I muttered to the empty room. Rachel was pregnant. She hadn't breathed a word of this to me. That's a life-changing piece of news. Why keep it secret? And how long had she known? Questions spiraled like a tornado in my head, and I had nowhere to channel them. I put the test back down, my hands shaking. That was when I glanced up at the bathroom mirror, catching my own reflection, wide eyes, parted lips, looking completely freaked out. And beneath the shock, an undercurrent of dread, because Rachel had never been shy or secretive before. We had our sibling squabbles, okay, plenty of them, but major life events? She usually bragged or, at minimum, shared them openly. So why hide a pregnancy in my bathroom? I stepped out into the hallway, my mind racing. There was a weird vibe in the house that morning, but I'd chalked it up to tension between Ethan and Rachel. They'd been, well, let's just say not getting along so well since she moved in. I'd caught them having some hushed conversation late one night that ended with Rachel slamming the door to our guest room. When I asked Ethan what that was about, he just said, "We're both stressed, you know? She needs to find her own place soon. Don't worry." Don't worry, right. That's like telling a fish not to swim. I tried to puzzle out the timeline. Could Rachel have found out just now? That would explain the sudden trip, maybe. But then why come to my place? We weren't particularly close. In fact, she seemed to tolerate me more than adore me, and she definitely wasn't on warm terms with Ethan. So what was going on? I was still standing there, half lost in thought, when I heard a noise from outside the front door. My heart lurched. I tucked the test into the linen closet. Don't ask why, it felt like some ridiculous reflex, and leaned over the banister to see who was coming in. It was Ethan, carrying a paper bag from the local deli. "Honey, I'm home," he joked, stepping inside. "Figured we could have lunch together since I had a meeting cancel last minute." "Sure," I managed, my voice shakier than I intended. My hands fidgeted at my sides as I walked down the stairs. "Everything okay?" He gave me a curious glance. "Yeah, everything's fine. Why?" I opened my mouth to mention the pregnancy test right then and there, but something stopped me. A weird gut feeling. Before I could rationalize it, I found myself stammering, no reason. I'm just a little out of it. Didn't sleep well." He frowned, stepping closer to place a hand on my shoulder. "You sure you're okay? You look pale." "Yeah, just a headache maybe," I lied. Ethan studied me for a moment, then nodded. He set the deli bag on the kitchen counter, pulling out 2 sandwiches. "Turkey or roast beef?" he asked, his tone cheerful, trying to lighten the mood. "Turkey," I said automatically, my mind still on that test. I watched him carefully, feeling an unexplainable knot of tension in my stomach. It was insane for me to suspect anything sinister. Right? But I couldn't help noticing how he seemed edgy, or maybe I was just imagining it because I was edgy. Over lunch, I forced small talk, nibbling at half a sandwich while Ethan chatted about his canceled meeting. He asked what chores I'd gotten done. I forced a smile, though I'm sure it looked more like a grimace. My brain was screaming at me to just say it, to hold up that stick and demand, "Why is this in our house?" But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed my questions with a swig of iced tea. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan cleared his throat. "Hey, so, about Rachel," he began, his voice wary. "She's been here a while now. Do you think we should encourage her to find another place soon?" My stomach dropped. "Is there a reason you want her out so fast?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's not that I don't want her here, but well, you said she can be hard to live with, and I just feel like it's causing tension between us all. Maybe it's time to have that conversation." The conversation about making my sister leave, the sister who might be pregnant, I felt a swirl of emotions, guilt, concern, confusion. "I guess we can talk to her," I said quietly, "but maybe there's something else going on with her that we don't know." I left it at that, not wanting to open the can of worms yet. Ethan just nodded, taking another bite of his sandwich. For a brief moment, his gaze flicked away from me, settling somewhere off to the side. It only lasted a second, but it felt weighted, like he was hiding something behind his eyes. Was I imagining it? Possibly. But the uneasy feeling in my gut only grew. After lunch, he left for another meeting. I practically sprinted back to the bathroom, retrieving the pregnancy test from the linen closet. I needed to confirm what I'd seen. The positive line was still faint, but definitely there. My mind ran through possibilities again, each one more unsettling than the last. That afternoon, I waited anxiously for Rachel to come home, rehearsing how I'd confront her. But as evening rolled in, she didn't show up. No text, no call. I checked her social media, dead quiet. This was typical Rachel, though. She floated in and out of places at her own pace, rarely explaining herself. But now it wasn't just rude, it felt ominous. Because if she was pregnant, why wouldn't she talk to me about it, especially if she needed a place to stay? That night, Ethan came back, saying he was exhausted. He flopped onto the couch, turning on some random show. I hovered in the kitchen, deciding whether to press him about the test. Fear and confusion knotted together, tying my tongue. Looking back now, I wish I'd asked him that very night. Maybe I could have saved myself a world of pain. But sometimes, we hide from the truth because we sense it's uglier than we can handle. Instead, I went to bed with a pounding heart, the pregnancy test burning a hole in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the thought. Why was it in my bathroom, and who else in this house might know about it besides me? I woke up the next morning to the sound of quiet footsteps padding down the hallway. My eyes flew open. It had to be Rachel. I glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. She usually slept in until 10. Why was she up so early? I threw on a robe and tiptoed out of the bedroom. There she was, rummaging in the kitchen cupboards like she was searching for something. Coffee, I assumed. Her expression looked tense, like she'd barely slept. Dark circles under her eyes, hair messy in a hastily gathered bun. "Morning," I said, trying not to sound accusatory. She whipped around, nearly dropping the coffee mug in her hand. "Oh, you scared me." She shot me a look that was half annoyance, half relief. "I didn't think you'd be up yet." "I heard you," I replied, wrapping my robe tighter. My mind flashed to the pregnancy test. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Rachel, can we talk?" She sighed. "Look, if this is about me taking over your living room last night, I swear I'll keep it neater. I just got back late." "Where were you?" I cut in gently. She paused, eyes flicking away. "Just out." "Doing what?" I pressed, heart pounding. "Rachel, I found something in the bathroom yesterday, something that doesn't belong to me." Her grip on the mug tightened. For a split second, panic flickered across her face. Then she put on this forced casual grin. "Oh, you found that, huh?" My stomach twisted. "So, it's yours." She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Let's not blow this out of proportion. I was just..." She faltered, then groaned. "Fine, yes, it's mine. Can we keep it between us? I'm not ready for a big announcement." I folded my arms, suddenly feeling the chill of the early morning air in the house. "Rachel, you're pregnant. That's pretty huge news. Why are you hiding it?" She let out a bitter laugh, avoiding my gaze. "Because it's not exactly planned, obviously, and I don't even know if I'm keeping it." "There, I said it." Her voice wobbled. I felt a burst of sympathy and concern, overshadowed by confusion. "But you came here. Why?" She hesitated before answering. I needed space. My life's a mess. I lost my job, my ex-boyfriend kicked me out, and then I realized I might be pregnant. It was all too much. I frowned, and you couldn't just tell me. Rachel huffed, setting the coffee mug down a little too hard. I didn't exactly expect to be welcomed with open arms. We don't have the warmest sisterly relationship, in case you forgot. Her words stung. We drifted, sure, but I never thought I'd turn her away if she needed help. I'm not heartless, I said softly, just shocked. She stared into her coffee. Now you know, but please don't say anything to Ethan yet, or to Mom and Dad. I need to figure out what I'm doing. I thought about it, biting back the questions swirling in my head. Who's the father? Why are you acting so suspicious? But Rachel looked so fragile right then, I couldn't bring myself to demand answers. Okay, I agreed reluctantly. But can I ask, when did you find out you were pregnant? She tensed. A few weeks ago, right before I showed up here. My heart hammered. So she'd known all this time, yet she chose to keep me completely in the dark. Something about that timeline bothered me, but before I could dig deeper, she grabbed her coffee and mumbled something about taking a walk. Moments later, she was gone, the front door clicking shut behind her. I stood in the empty kitchen, head spinning. She wanted me to keep this secret from Ethan, but how could I? I wasn't good at lying to him. We'd always been fairly transparent about most things, except I was obviously holding back about this test I'd found. Speaking of Ethan, I heard him stirring upstairs. I went back to the bedroom to check on him, heart pounding. He was in bed, propped on an elbow, scrolling through his phone. Morning, he greeted me, yawning. Who was banging around in the kitchen? Rachel, I said, forcing casualness. She went out. He arched an eyebrow. She's up early. I nodded, avoiding his gaze. My instincts told me not to spill Rachel's secret yet, especially since she'd just pleaded with me. But there was a weight in my chest. I cleared my throat. You have any idea why she's been so tense lately? Ethan shrugged, tossing his phone onto the nightstand. She's always had a flair for drama. Maybe she's fighting with her boyfriend or something. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected automatically. He caught that detail and frowned. Ex, did she tell you that? I realized I might be revealing too much. Yeah, she's been dealing with a breakup, apparently. He sighed, raking a hand through his hair. Well, that sucks, but it doesn't mean she can crash here forever. We do have our own lives, you know. A pang of guilt shot through me. Ethan's reaction felt cold, especially if I factored in Rachel's pregnancy. But maybe he really didn't know, or maybe he was just frustrated. I decided not to push it for now. I changed the subject, asking about his day. He launched into some story about a client he had to meet downtown, and I half listened, all while my mind kept drifting to Rachel. That afternoon, I tried texting her, asking if she was okay. No response. By the time I got home from running errands, she was back, but locked in the guest room, door firmly shut. I paused outside, listening. Silence. I could have knocked, but something in me held back. A memory floated up. The night before, I'd overheard her and Ethan talking in low voices. Could that have been about her pregnancy? Did Ethan already know? The thought raised my pulse. Unable to bear the tension, I headed to the living room, only to run into Ethan. He was standing by the window, looking pensive. When he noticed me, he forced a little smile. Hey, want to order takeout tonight? Sure, I said, my voice weak. Chinese pizza. Let's do Chinese, he replied. Then, out of nowhere, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen, about Rachel, have you noticed anything off with her? Like more than usual? My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Did he suspect she was pregnant? Was he testing me? Why do you ask? I countered. He shrugged, avoiding eye contact. I just walked past the guest room and heard her crying earlier. I knocked, but she told me to go away. I swallowed. She's going through a lot, I said simply, hoping he'd leave it at that. Ethan nodded, but his eyes flickered with a strange unease. Yeah, well, I hope she figures it out soon. This atmosphere is killing me. We ordered Chinese, ate quietly, and retreated to different corners of the house. Me to our bedroom, Ethan back to the living room TV. Late that night, I heard muffled sobs from down the hall. Rachel. My heart broke for her, but I also felt a confusing swirl of resentment. Why was she shutting me out, forcing me to guess at her secrets? By the next morning, I decided I couldn't stand the silence. I tapped on the guest room door. No answer. Ratch, can we talk? I tried, gently. Finally, the door opened a crack. She looked terrible, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled. What? I braced myself. Look, I'm worried about you, and I need to know who the father is. Is it your ex-boyfriend? She stared at me for a long moment, and I thought she might snap. Instead, her shoulders sagged. It's complicated. He and I were on a break. Then we got back together for like a minute. Then everything fell apart again. That's not exactly an answer. I kept my tone soft but firm. Rachel shook her head. Why does it matter anyway? I'm not asking you for money. I'm not even sure I'm keeping it. I just need a place to breathe for a while. I felt a little stab of guilt. It matters because you're my sister and I care about you. And if you're pregnant, this affects you, your future, your whole life. She blinked back tears, glaring at me. Well, if you care so much, maybe stop interrogating me. With that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, anger and worry mixing in my gut. She was obviously spiraling, but her hostility was pushing me away. I didn't know how to help her if she wouldn't let me in. Later that day, Ethan cornered me in the kitchen. We need to figure something out about Rachel, he muttered. This can't go on. Figure out what exactly? I snapped, suddenly on edge. She's my sister. I can't just throw her onto the street because it's inconvenient for us. He sighed, setting down a glass of water. She's not telling us anything. She's sneaking around, crying at all hours, and she exploded at me last night for no reason. I'm just trying to keep the peace here. I took a shaky breath. We'll give her a bit more time. That's all we can do. He pressed his lips together, looking frustrated but nodded. Fine. Days passed, and the household tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I tried talking to Rachel again, but she was either out or locked in the guest room. Meanwhile, Ethan got increasingly restless, packing around, complaining under his breath that our privacy was shot. At times, I caught him glancing at me like he wanted to say something serious, but he never did. Then came the night I overheard them again. I had woken up at around 2 a.m. to get some water. As I crossed the living room, I heard low voices in the guest room. One was Rachel's, muffled and emotional. The other was definitely Ethan. My heart pounded. Why was he in there with her at this hour? My mind spiraled with alarming thoughts. I couldn't hear it clearly, just snippets of their whispers. Something about telling her and not the right time. My blood ran cold. Telling who, me? My hand hovered near the door, tempted to barge in. But a wave of fear washed over me. What if I discovered something I couldn't handle? I went back to bed, my head spinning. Were they talking about the pregnancy? Did Ethan already know? Or worse, was there some twisted secret between them that had nothing to do with an ex-boyfriend? By dawn, I felt sick with suspicion, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Rachel was pregnant, Ethan was concerned because he's a decent person, maybe he was just trying to help. That's all it was. Right. That morning, I confronted Ethan calmly at breakfast. Hey, did you talk to Rachel last night? He froze, spoonful of cereal halfway to his mouth. Yeah, she was upset. I heard her crying, just wanted to check on her, that's all. And, I pressed, what did she say? He looked uncomfortable. Nothing much, she wouldn't open up. I stared at him, heart thudding. So you were in her room, but she didn't open up. He shrugged, looking away. She yelled at me to get out, basically. Something about his story didn't sit right, but I couldn't call him a liar without proof. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself for now. I left for work, my emotions in turmoil. As I sat through meeting after meeting, I barely heard a word. All I could think about was the pregnancy test, Rachel's cryptic behavior, and Ethan's possibly incomplete story. By the time I got home, I was resolved to corner Rachel again. But once again, she was nowhere to be found. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind played out worst-case scenarios, each more horrifying than the last. A new fear began to crystallize. What if Rachel's baby wasn't her ex's? What if something unthinkable had happened with Ethan? I tried to push the thought away. It was too awful to consider. My sister and my husband? No, that was insane. But as the hours ticked by, the suspicion dug deeper, refusing to let me rest. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrets fester in the darkness, growing into something monstrous. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening under my roof was far uglier than I was prepared for. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Every time I walked into the kitchen or living room, I braced myself, half expecting to find Rachel and Ethan huddled together, whispering, only to clam up the second they saw me. My heart pounded for any hint that my worst fear might be real, even though I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. Still, the anxiety gnawed at me, day and night. That weekend, I decided enough was enough. Rachel was holed up in the guest room, blinds drawn, phone glued to her hand. Whenever I tried to approach her, she acted cagey or downright hostile. Ethan, on the other hand, spent an unusual amount of time out of the house, allegedly running errands or meeting friends. Our routine changed so drastically, I felt like I was walking on eggshells everywhere. Saturday morning, I woke up to find Ethan in the backyard, packing on the phone. Through the window, I could see him gesturing, sounding urgent. The moment he realized I was watching, he ended the call abruptly. When he came in, I asked, "Who was that?" He looked startled. "Oh, just a client from work. Problem with a contract." I tried to read his expression. Was he lying? His eyes darted away too quickly. I forced a nod, but suspicion rumbled in my gut. Was he talking to Rachel's ex? Or to Rachel herself, setting up some clandestine plan? My phone buzzed, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. It was my mom, calling out of the blue. That was strange. She rarely phoned unless there was big news or a family emergency. I stepped outside to answer, letting the door click shut behind me. Mom's voice crackled over the line. "Honey, have you heard from Rachel? She hasn't called us in weeks. She used to check in all the time, but now she's gone silent." My chest tightened. Rachel used to call them weekly, bragging about her job or a new date. If she suddenly stopped, it meant something was truly off. "Mom, she's staying with me. She didn't tell you." There was a pause. She didn't mention that at all. Is she okay? I hesitated, trying to balance honesty and my sister's request for secrecy. She's going through a rough patch, lost her job, broke up with her boyfriend. She wanted some space. Mom let out a concerned sigh. "I see. Well, can you tell her to call us? We've been worried. Your father even wondered if she was in another country, running from trouble or something." I promised I'd pass along the message. After hanging up, I stared at my phone, half tempted to call them back and spill everything about the pregnancy. But I stopped myself. That was Rachel's secret to share, or at least it had been. Now it felt like a ticking time bomb in my life, too. When I went back inside, Ethan was in the living room, flipping through TV channels with a distracted air. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My mom just called. She's worried about Rachel." He clicked the TV off. "Yeah, did you tell her what's going on?" I shook my head. "No, she should hear it from Rachel, right?" He gave a tight nod, then stared at me for a moment, like he was weighing what to say next. Finally, he spoke. "I think we need to have a family meeting, all three of us. This secret-keeping is driving me insane." My throat clenched. The irony was brutal. I knew at least part of Rachel's secret, her pregnancy, but I suspected Ethan might know something else. "A meeting," I echoed. "Are you sure she'll talk?" He grimaced. "She might yell, but at least we can force a conversation." We agreed to corner her that evening. Despite my nerves, I felt relieved. Whatever was festering between us needed to come out into the open. I spent the rest of the day trying to steel myself, half expecting Rachel to vanish again, but she stayed in her room, door locked. That evening, after dinner, Ethan and I approached the guest room door together. I knocked firmly. "Rachel, can we talk, all of us, please?" There was a long silence. I could picture her on the other side, arms crossed, resisting. Then the door opened. She looked even more exhausted than before, eyes puffy. "Fine," she muttered, "but I'm not in the mood for a lecture." We went to the living room. Ethan perched on the edge of the couch while Rachel took the armchair. I stood awkwardly by the TV, my heart hammering. Nobody spoke for a few seconds, tension thick in the air. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "Rachel, we're worried about you," he began, trying for a calm tone. "You won't tell us what's going on. You cry all night. You've been hostile toward both of us. We just want to help." Rachel gave a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry my existence is so inconvenient." "That's not what he meant," I interjected softly, stepping forward. "We know you're going through something serious, and I do know about the pregnancy." Her eyes flashed. "You told him," she snapped, shooting me a withering glare. I raised my palms. No, I didn't. I promised I wouldn't, but I couldn't keep quiet forever. It's obviously affecting everything. Ethan looked surprised, or at least did a good job faking it. Pregnancy, he turned to Rachel, is that true? She stared at him, her lips trembling. Oh my God, you're acting like you didn't know. His mouth fell open. Wait, what do you mean? Rachel sprang to her feet, eyes blazing with pent-up emotion. Don't you dare play innocent. You knew I was pregnant. Why else would you be pushing me to leave to keep it a secret? She turned to me, tears slipping down her cheeks. He already knew. He found the test before you did, and he's been telling me to keep quiet ever since. I felt my heart lurch, anger and confusion boiling together. I whipped around to face Ethan. Is that true? He blanched, shifting uncomfortably. I found it the other day, yes. I saw it on the counter, but I wasn't sure whose it was. I guessed it might be Rachel, but I didn't want to pry. Rachel let out a harsh sob. Liar, you came to me, demanded I hide it. Said it'd stress your wife out. Told me if I didn't keep quiet, you'd make me leave. So don't pretend you're some innocent bystander. I stared at Ethan, my voice trembling. Is that what you said to her? He raked a hand through his hair, looking cornered. I might have told her it would be better not to upset you. You've been under a lot of pressure with work, and I didn't think you needed the added stress of dealing with a pregnant sister. But I never threatened her. Rachel scoffed, folding her arms protectively across her chest. Yeah, sure. I guess it was just a friendly suggestion to get rid of me. My emotions swirled like a storm. On one hand, I could see Ethan's twisted logic. He might have just been trying to spare me anxiety. On the other hand, how dare he keep such a massive secret from me? And how dare Rachel let me walk around clueless for weeks? Ethan stood, trying to approach her, but she recoiled. I'm sorry, okay? He said, voice taut with exasperation. I messed up. I should have told my wife immediately, but I wasn't trying to be malicious. I cut in, my words shaky. Rachel, if you're pregnant, why are you so terrified of telling anyone? If the father is your ex, what's the big secret? She hesitated, her eyes flicking between me and Ethan. The silence dragged, each second making my heart pound louder. Then she whispered, because I don't know if it's my ex's. Time seemed to freeze. I felt as though the room tilted beneath me. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. What does that mean? Rachel's lips quivered. It means there's a chance the father is someone else. I didn't dare look at Ethan. My mind flew to every worst-case scenario I'd been tormenting myself with for days. I started to tremble, tears pricking my eyes. Rachel, who else could it be? She stared at me, silent, her eyes filling up with fresh tears. Ethan looked like he was about to say something, but she shook her head violently. I can't, she murmured, voice cracking. I just can't. And she bolted from the living room, fleeing to her guest room and slamming the door behind her. I stood there, breathing hard, my head spinning. Ethan reached out to me, but I jerked away, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Tell me, I said, my voice trembling with anger and fear. Is there something between you and my sister? He opened his mouth, struggling for words. No, absolutely not. This is insane. But the doubt was already lodged in my heart, and Rachel's unfinished confession hung in the air like a blade about to fall. One question echoed in my mind, sending chills down my spine. If her baby isn't her ex's, then whose is it? And I couldn't ignore the horrible possibility that the answer might be sleeping beside me every night. I locked myself in our bedroom for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every ugly scenario. Ethan knocked on the door repeatedly, begging me to let him in so we could talk. But I couldn't face him. Not yet. Not when my imagination was running wild. Every forced smile he'd given me, every hushed conversation with Rachel, every time he'd told me I was overthinking, felt like it could have been a cover-up for betrayal. Please, he called through the door. You have to believe me, there's nothing going on. I would never do that to you. I squeezed my eyes shut, silent tears streaming down my cheeks. I wanted to believe him, but Rachel's cryptic confession echoed in my ears. She wasn't sure who the father was. If it wasn't her ex, then who else could it be? The doubt smothered me, driving me deeper into panic and heartbreak. Eventually, the anger in my veins forced me to open the door. Ethan stood there, disheveled, worry etched across his features. Talk to me, he pleaded, stepping in cautiously. I pushed past him, heading downstairs. I needed space, fresh air, anything to clear my head. He followed like a shadow, determined not to let me bolt from the house without answers. In the living room, I spun around to face him, arms folded across my chest. "All right then," I said, voice trembling. "Explain. Start from the beginning. Tell me every conversation you've had with Rachel since she moved in." He swallowed hard, glancing at the staircase as if worried she might appear at any moment. "Okay," he said quietly. "The day she arrived, I heard her crying in the guest room. I asked what was wrong, and she said she'd lost her job, had a messy breakup. She was just shattered. I tried to comfort her. That's all." "Keep going," I urged, my heart pounding. He sighed. "A few days later, I found the pregnancy test in the bathroom before you discovered it. I confronted her. She begged me not to say anything to you. She said she'd tell you in her own time, that she didn't want to stress you out. I didn't exactly threaten her, but I told her living here wouldn't be easy if she caused tension in our marriage. Maybe that came off as pressure. I'm sorry." "And those late-night whispers?" I demanded, tears in my eyes. "The times I caught you in her room at 2 a.m., what was that about?" He shook his head, looking exhausted. "She was in meltdown mode, crying that she was scared, didn't know what to do about the pregnancy. I tried to get her to open up, talk to you, or see a doctor. She refused. She kept saying she couldn't handle your judgment, that she didn't want the family knowing. I thought I was helping by keeping her secret a little longer." I studied his face, searching for any hint of deception. Ethan's eyes were red, his posture defeated. If he was lying, he was giving the performance of a lifetime. Still, the doubt lingered. "So you never had any kind of relationship with her?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Nothing happened before or after we got married?" He looked horrified. "God, no, never, your sister. Never shown any interest in me, and I'm not interested in her. She's your family, for crying out loud. The thought of that is disgusting." "Then why does she act like you're the father?" I burst out, anger and heartbreak mixing together. "She practically implied it." Ethan raked a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I can't explain that. Maybe she's just lashing out because she's miserable and wants to shift the blame. You know how Rachel gets when she's cornered. She says whatever hurts the most." His words stung because, in some twisted way, they made sense. I knew how Rachel could be. Dramatic, impulsive, sometimes cruel when she felt trapped. Could she have thrown Ethan under the bus just to deflect her own guilt? But then again, what if it was all an elaborate manipulation from him? I felt like I was drowning in conflicting emotions. "This is insane," I whispered, sinking onto the couch. "I don't know who to believe." He knelt beside me, gently placing a hand on my knee. "Believe me," he said, voice trembling. "Please, I love you. I would never do something so horrible. You have every right to doubt me, but I promise you I'm telling the truth." I stared at him, tears filling my eyes again. The sincerity in his gaze tugged at my heart, yet the fear of betrayal stayed lodged like a knife in my chest. Finally, I whispered, "I'm not ready to forgive you for keeping her secret, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt about the other thing. For now." He sighed, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, that's all I can ask." There was a moment of tense silence, and then he added, "What about Rachel? She's clearly on edge. We can't just let her isolate herself forever." I nodded shakily. "We need to talk to her, but if she won't talk, I might just have to call my parents. This is getting out of control." We agreed to try again that night. I spent the day on autopilot, flipping between suspicion and a longing for normalcy. Could Ethan be telling me the truth? Was Rachel simply lashing out? Part of me recalled childhood memories of Rachel's theatrics. The time she accused my friend of stealing her favorite necklace, only to admit later she'd lost it herself. She was good at deflecting blame, especially when cornered. By evening, though, guilt gnawed at me. If she truly was pregnant by some random fling, maybe she felt terrified and alone. I considered the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was abusive or that the fling ended badly. She might be scared of judgment from our parents, who always saw her as the perfect child. That panic might be fueling her erratic behavior. When dinner time arrived, Ethan and I were quietly setting the table, steamed veggies, rice, chicken. The usual. Rachel emerged from the hallway like a ghost, her face pale, hair unwashed. She looked at the food with a weak, tired expression. I'm not hungry, she muttered, trying to slip past us. I blocked her path. Ratch, please, you have to eat something, and we need to talk. She glared at me, then at Ethan, before letting out a ragged sigh. Fine. We sat at the table in silence for a moment, the tension suffocating. I pushed a glass of water toward Rachel. You haven't been drinking enough water, I said softly, maternal instincts kicking in. That can't be good if you're pregnant. She shot me a resentful look but took a sip anyway. Then she set the glass down, folding her arms. So, what's this big talk about? Ethan cleared his throat. We need to figure out how to help you, or at least, how to not live in constant stress under the same roof. She sneered, help me, by accusing me of sleeping with your husband. I flinched at her blunt words. I'm sorry, I mumbled, feeling shame welling up. You implied. I implied nothing, she snapped. I said I wasn't sure who the father is, and you two jumped to conclusions. If you want to know so badly, fine. It's not Ethan. But don't expect me to explain further. My lungs deflated in relief, but I was also furious. Then why act like it could be him? You basically let me think that. She let out a bitter laugh. Because I was angry. And sometimes I say stupid things when I'm hurt. You were all over me with your questions. I felt attacked. Ethan exhaled sharply, sounding both relieved and exasperated. So you purposely twisted the truth to hurt us. Rachel's eyes glistened. I'm sorry, okay? My life is a disaster. I lost my job, my ex won't speak to me, and now I'm pregnant with a guy I barely know. I hate myself for it, and I hate how you two keep treating me like a child. My anger softened at the vulnerability in her voice. I placed a hand over hers. Rachel, we're worried about you. That's why we ask questions. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Well, worry less about me and more about how you can handle me crashing here, because I don't have anywhere else to go right now. I squeezed her hand gently, my heart aching. You can stay as long as you need, but you have to stop keeping us in the dark. This secrecy is toxic. She nodded miserably, wiping her tears. Okay, I'll try. Then she glanced at Ethan. I'm sorry for implying things that weren't true. He managed a small nod. I appreciate that. A delicate silence fell over the table. Despite everything, I felt a rush of relief. My marriage wasn't destroyed by some unspeakable betrayal, at least not the one I'd feared. And Rachel was finally admitting some truth. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, we shared a meal without shouting. Rachel picked at her food, tears occasionally slipping down her cheeks, while Ethan and I exchanged cautious glances. Afterward, she went back to the guest room, but with less of that bitter tension hanging over us. Yet as I cleared the dishes, I realized the relief was only partial. Rachel's admission that it was Ethan's child helped calm my worst suspicion, but we still had a massive challenge ahead. An unplanned pregnancy, an unknown father, and a sister whose emotional stability was teetering on the edge. And there was another question gnawing at my mind. Why would she bring all this chaos into our home in the first place? She had friends, old roommates. Why me? What if there was still a deeper reason she wasn't telling? Because while we'd cleared up the immediate suspicion, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel had more secrets tucked away. And sooner or later, they'd come crashing down on us all, whether we were ready or not. I wish I could say everything was fine after that night. But while the immediate tension had eased, a heavy cloud still loomed over the house. My sister was pregnant and scared, and I felt caught between relief that Ethan wasn't the father and dread that we still weren't getting the full story. Over the next week, Rachel functioned like a ghost. Some mornings, I heard her retching in the bathroom, and my heart twisted with sympathy. Other times, she'd sulk in the guest room, curtains shut tight. Occasionally, she'd try to act normal, wandering into the kitchen to chat about the latest Netflix show she was binging or asking if we could order pizza. But beneath that surface, I sensed she was holding back. Finally, one Saturday afternoon, I decided to have a sister-to-sister talk. Ethan was out at the grocery store, so the house was quieter. I made us some tea, peppermint for her, chamomile for me, and carried it to her room. I knocked gently, and she let me in without protest. She looked tired but calmer, curled up on the bed with a blanket draped over her legs. I handed her the tea, and she thanked me in a small voice. For a moment, we just sipped in silence, the tension in the air almost palpable. Rachel, I said softly, setting my cup on the nightstand. I know you said the father isn't your ex or Ethan, but you still haven't told me who he is. Why is it such a big secret? You know you can trust me, right? Her eyes filled with tears. She stared at the steaming tea in her hands. It's not that simple. I waited, letting the silence stretch, hoping she'd find the words. Eventually, she spoke, her voice trembling. He's married, okay? Married and older. I met him through my last job. He was kind of my boss. And when we got involved, everything fell apart. My jaw dropped. Your boss? Oh my God, Rachel, was he the reason you lost your job? She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I guess you could say that. I tried to end it, but he got angry. Said if I breathed a word, he'd ruin my references. And then I found out I was pregnant. Oh my God, I murmured, reaching for her hand. That's awful, I'm so sorry. She sniffled, wiping her eyes. I couldn't stay in that city. I had no money, no way to fight back. So I packed up and came here. I didn't know where else to go. I figured you might let me crash for a while. My heart clenched with a mix of pity and frustration. Why not just tell me from the start? I would have helped. She let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, right. You and Ethan were already living your perfect married life. I was ashamed, okay? And I figured if you knew the truth, you'd treat me like some homewrecker. I swallowed hard, guilt prickling my chest. Rachel, we're not perfect. We have our own issues. But you're my sister. I don't want you out on the street. She gazed at me through tears. I know I messed up. It was a stupid affair, but at the time, I was lonely, felt underappreciated. He kept telling me he'd leave his wife. I believed him like an idiot. I squeezed her hand gently. How do you feel now? About keeping the baby? She shuddered, taking a shaky breath. I'm terrified. A part of me wants to keep it. Maybe this is my wake-up call to change my life. But another part of me is just so scared of doing it alone. What if he sues for custody, or refuses child support, or tries to keep me quiet forever? My stomach flipped at the thought of her ex-boss pulling strings to control her. Rachel, you might need legal help, or at least a counselor to figure this out. You can't just hide in our guest room forever. She nodded, tears flowing freely now. I know, but every time I think about telling Mom and Dad or going public about this, I panic. They always see me as the golden child, and now I'm, well, this. I leaned over, hugging her. She stiffened for a moment, then let out a sob and clung to me like I was her lifeline. I stroked her hair, tears of my own threatening to spill. You're not a failure, you just made a mistake. And you're not alone. Ethan and I will help however we can, but you have to trust us enough to let us in. She nodded, wiping her face on the blanket. Thank you, she whispered, her voice ragged. I'm so sorry for all the drama. I managed a small laugh, even though my eyes were damp. We'll get through it, but no more secrets, okay? She nodded, and for the first time, I felt like we'd finally reached a breakthrough. The father's identity, though shocking, explained why she was so guarded, and also why she'd reacted so defensively whenever we pried. She'd been trying to protect herself from more pain and judgment. Later that afternoon, Ethan returned with groceries. I asked Rachel if we could loop him in on the truth, and after a moment's hesitation, she agreed. The three of us sat in the living room again, a familiar tension hanging in the air. But this time, Rachel explained everything about her boss, the affair, the fear, the job loss. Ethan listened, clearly taken aback. I'm sorry you went through that, he said quietly. I had no idea. If I sounded harsh earlier, it was because I thought you were just being moody. I didn't realize it was this serious. She nodded, her gaze downcast. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry for making you both suspect each other. That was never my intention. I felt a small weight lift off my chest. No matter how messy the situation was, at least now we had honesty. I asked Ethan, so what's next? She can't just hide in our house forever, but we can't throw her to the wolves either. He raked a hand through his hair, thinking. Well, if her ex-boss tries to intimidate her, we can help her seek legal advice. There might be resources, especially if he wrongfully fired her. And as for the pregnancy, we can support whatever decision she makes. Rachel let out a shaky breath. I really don't want to go back to that city, but I also can't stay here indefinitely, imposing on your marriage. I placed a hand over hers again. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. There was a collective sense of relief that night, a fragile peace settling in the house. We ordered takeout, watched some mindless comedy, and for the first time in weeks, laughed together, even if it was just a little. Rachel still seemed haunted, but she was no longer isolating herself. As I cleaned up after dinner, though, a strange feeling nagged at me, like an itch I couldn't quite scratch. The biggest secret was out, so why did I still feel uneasy? Maybe it was just the aftermath of so much drama, or maybe the fear that her married ex-boss would show up on our doorstep, demanding something unthinkable. Ethan found me in the kitchen, rinsing plates. He slipped an arm around my waist. "You okay?" I leaned my head against his shoulder, letting the warm, soapy water run over my hands. "Yeah, just worried about what happens next. Are we prepared to deal with all the fallout?" He pressed his lips to my temple. "We'll manage, we always do." I hoped he was right, because part of me suspected that the real storm wasn't behind us. Rachel's ex-boss might have more power than we realized, and if he decided to lash out, we could be in serious trouble. But for the moment, at least, we had honesty. And in a family torn by secrets, that felt like the first true step toward healing. I went to bed that night clinging to that small beacon of hope, praying we'd have the strength to weather whatever came next. I wish I could tell you that Rachel's honesty solved everything and life returned to normal. But life rarely works like that, especially with secrets this big. About a week after our talk, we got a glimpse of just how tangled her situation really was. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the living room, editing some work emails on my laptop, when someone banged on our front door. Like, full-on pounding, as if they were ready to break it down. My heart lurched. I rushed to open the door, half expecting the police or an ambulance. Instead, I came face to face with a tall, well-dressed man in his mid-40s. He looked furious, chest heaving like he'd just run a marathon. "Where is she?" he demanded, eyes flaring. "I know she's here." I felt my stomach drop. "Who are you?" I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. He practically snarled. "I'm the man she's been hiding from, the father of that baby she's carrying. Don't you dare slam this door on me." My throat tightened. So this was Rachel's married ex-boss. And he was here, on my doorstep, looking about ready to start a war. Before I could respond, I heard Rachel's voice behind me. "Elliot," she said shakily, stepping up beside me. "What are you doing here?" He glared at her, his face twisted with anger and desperation. "I came to talk some sense into you. You disappeared, blocked my number. This is serious. You can't just vanish with a baby that might be mine." At that moment, Ethan appeared in the hallway, taking in the scene. "Sir, I don't know who you are," he said firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder, "but you're not welcome to barge in here like this." Elliot jabbed a finger at Ethan. "Stay out of it. This is between me and Rachel." I felt my heart hammering. Elliot's aggression was tangible, and Rachel looked pale as a sheet. I gently stepped forward. "Look, she's told us about the situation. You need to calm down. We can all talk like adults." His eyes flicked toward me, then back to Rachel. "You made a huge mistake running away," he spat. "We need to figure out what's happening with this child, and we need to do it without your meddling family." Rachel gathered her courage. "No," she snapped, tears in her eyes. "I'm done with your manipulations. I tried to talk things through with you before, and you threatened to ruin my career. I'm not going back to that." Elliot's jaw clenched, and he took a step closer. "Don't push me, Rachel. I have resources you can't imagine. You think hiding in your sister's house will protect you." Ethan moved between them, his voice low and controlled. "Take one more step toward her, and I'm calling the police." For a moment, I thought Elliot might actually lash out, but instead, he let out a humorless laugh. "Fine," he hissed. "Call the cops. It won't change a thing. My lawyers will handle this in court if that's the way she wants it." Rachel was trembling. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" she pleaded. He sneered. "Because I don't trust you not to trap me with child support demands or to go public with some sob story that ruins my reputation. I have a wife, kids, a company. Do you think I'll just let you blow that up?" Tears slid down Rachel's cheeks. "You promised me you were leaving your wife. You lied." Elliot's eyes flickered with contempt. "I never promised anything. You assumed." It was all too much. My heart ached for my sister, but adrenaline surged through me. "You need to leave," I told him, my voice surprisingly steady. "You're trespassing and harassing her in my home." He eyed us with raw hatred. "You're making a mistake," he warned, backing away. "I'll be in touch, and if you try to disappear again, I'll make sure you regret it." Then he stalked down the driveway, got into a sleek black car, and sped off, leaving the air charged with anxiety. I realized my hands were shaking. Ethan quickly locked the door, and Rachel collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. I sat beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders, my own tears burning at the corners of my eyes. Ethan knelt in front of us. "Rachel," he said gently, "we'll figure this out. He can't just show up here making threats." She swallowed, her voice coming out in ragged gasps. "He's telling the truth, though. He has money, power. He can drag me into a messy legal battle, make my life a living hell. I can't fight him." I rubbed her back soothingly, my own heart pounding. "But you don't have to fight alone. We'll stand by you. We can find a good lawyer, someone who specializes in cases like this." Rachel pressed her face into her hands. "I can't afford that, I'm broke." Ethan and I exchanged a worried glance. "We'll figure something out," he said firmly. "We have some savings, and maybe we can find a women's legal aid group or something similar." She looked at him with fresh tears. "Why would you do that for me, after everything I've put you through?" Ethan gave a small, sad smile. "Because you're family, and nobody deserves to be bullied by someone like that." Rachel broke down again, clinging to my arm, her sobs echoing through the room. In that moment, I felt a surge of protectiveness that even overshadowed my relief that Ethan wasn't the father. Rachel might have messed up, but she was still my sister, and she was in serious trouble. What followed was a whirlwind of research and phone calls. Over the next few days, Ethan and I scrambled to find legal resources for Rachel, pro bono lawyers, women's shelters, anything that might give her some guidance. We collected every scrap of evidence she had: text messages, emails from Elliot, details about her job termination. My stomach churned at the possibility of a drawn-out court battle, but there was no turning back now. Rachel's emotions swung wildly from fear to indignation. "I won't let him intimidate me," she'd say, then break down and worry about how she'd raise a baby if Elliot sabotaged her job prospects. It was an emotional roller coaster for all of us, but at least we were facing it together. Late one night, after Rachel had finally fallen asleep, Ethan and I sat in our dimly lit living room, leaning against each other. I felt exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. He gave my hand a squeeze. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "For sticking with me through all this," he murmured. "I know you doubted me for a while, and I get why, but you gave me the chance to prove I wasn't lying about, everything." A lump formed in my throat. "I'm sorry I ever suspected you of that." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Don't be. It's understandable. Sometimes our brains go to the darkest places when we feel threatened." I rested my head on his shoulder. "Yeah, well, this definitely counts as feeling threatened," I said dryly, gesturing to the cluster of legal notes and phone numbers spread on the coffee table. We sat there in silence for a bit, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Then Ethan spoke again, voice quiet. "No matter what happens with Rachel and Elliot, I'm just grateful we can face it together, and that our marriage is still intact." My eyes stung with tears of relief. "Me too," I whispered. "This has all been terrifying, but at least we're on the same side." A few days later, Rachel reached out to a volunteer lawyer specializing in workplace harassment and intimidation. She started gathering evidence. The lawyer explained that, depending on how things unfolded, Elliot could be held accountable for wrongful dismissal if that's how she lost her job. As for the baby, Rachel would have the right to child support, but that also meant dealing with Elliot's lawyers. It was daunting, but at least she wasn't alone. Our parents eventually found out. Rachel mustered the courage to tell them. They were shocked, of course, and not entirely approving of how she got into such a mess. But after the initial panic, they offered to help financially if it came to that. Knowing my mom and dad, they'd probably show up unannounced with a truckload of baby supplies if Rachel decided to keep the child. And that's exactly what she decided. One afternoon, she pulled me aside, tears in her eyes, and said, "I'm going to have this baby. I don't know how I'll do it, but I can't live with myself if I don't try. And maybe this is a chance for me to become better." I hugged her tight, tears streaming down my own face. "Whatever you choose, I'm here for you," I said. "We'll figure out how to handle Elliot." She clung to me, trembling with both fear and determination. "Thank you. I'm so sorry I let this chaos into your life." Over time, the madness didn't exactly disappear, but we found ways to cope. Rachel started therapy, trying to rebuild her confidence. My parents sent supportive messages, some with veiled lectures, but mostly love. And Ethan and I learned to let go of the paranoia that had almost driven us apart. We'd come through a crisis we never saw coming, and it had actually made us stronger. Looking back now, I see how easily suspicion can poison a relationship. I almost lost faith in my husband because my sister was hiding a secret she felt too ashamed to share. And in her fear, she nearly let me believe the worst. But in the end, honesty, painful as it was, pulled us back from the brink. I won't say everything's perfect. Elliot still looms as a threat, with legal battles on the horizon. Rachel has nights when she cries herself to sleep, overwhelmed by the reality of single motherhood. And Ethan and I are learning the fine line between supporting her and safeguarding our own marriage. But one thing is clear: secrets, especially in a family, can grow into monsters if you keep them locked away. Facing them head-on, however terrifying, is the only way to move forward. As for me, I've realized something important. Sometimes, loving someone means holding their hand even as they confront the darkest consequences of their actions. Rachel made a mess, but she's still my sister. And deep down, I know she's trying to become a person her future child can be proud of. My life's not the same as it was before I found that pregnancy test in my bathroom. Maybe that's a good thing. Because in the aftermath of betrayal, fear, and heartbreak, I've discovered a deeper sense of family. One that's messy and complicated, but also fierce in its devotion. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Some lessons cost you your peace of mind for a while, but what you gain is a new clarity on who you are and who stands by your side. Turns out, that clarity is worth all the secrets in the world. Because now, we have no secrets left, only the hard truth and a determination to get through it together.